Hey everybody, my name's Austin LaBarbera and I'm a CG artist. So recently I've been really interested in learning more about Unreal's material editor and more specifically on better ways to texture large objects with a decent amount of customization and general control over the material. And so after doing some extended research and digging around on the internet, I have come up with two methods I would like to share today. One of those methods using vertex painting, the other using splat mapping and material functions. And before I begin, I would like to thank three YouTubers that just helped me out a ton and really gave me a good understanding about what I'm about to show here today. And I really don't think was able to do it without those videos, and it was just a huge help. The first one would be Underscore, just for his great YouTube videos in general on Unreal Engine, but more specifically his video on vertex blending and more complex terrain materials really helped me a lot. And I use a lot of his methods and in my shaders here today. The second would be Ben Cloward, who is this industry veteran working at BioWare with just a huge, vast knowledge of shaders in general, really techie stuff, and just a really good library of content over there on his channel. And the third would be Ryan Manning for his videos on material functions and setting up a blend material using material functions. It helped me a lot, especially with the second method that I'm about to show here today. And he's just got some really great videos on Unreal Engine in general. So with that being said, let's hop into UE4 and start making some materials. Alright, so now that we're in UE4, let's talk about what we're going to build. So I'm going to switch over to another project where I was working on a completed version of this. It's almost like the cooking show where they open the oven and it's like, oh, we already got one done. So this was for an environment I was kind of working on. Let's change it to lit mode. And you can see I have this tiling concrete material, just kind of you can start to see the repetition real fast. So one way to kind of break that up is you can use decals, but I like to see how much can we get with just the initial material in general. So I have it to where you can start painting this more concrete, kind of rougher material that you can kind of go in and just paint over the surface, and it'll start to blend with the existing concrete. But then I was looking at a lot of materials used in the new Modern Warfare game, Modern Warfare 2019, which is a game I really love and been playing a lot. And I've been looking at their grounds, and I've noticed it's like a more smooth repeating concrete with a more chunky one. And then they'll also have like a wet material. And I think adding that little contrast there, getting this like shiny surface, like puddles that you can kind of go ahead and add, it gives a real nice contrast to the map, and it kind of helps break things up when you get really close. And then if you start going in and let's go over to, I'm using Mega Scans, by the way, and that's something we're going to be utilizing today since it's free with Unreal Engine. So if I go ahead and grab some decals and start throwing them on the surface over here, just switch over to the decal. You can start to see that when I finally get that in there, so if you start stacking some of these on top of each other and then you go in with like some of the vertex blending, you can start to create real complex effects. And rather than having just one material repeat across the surface, you get some breakup. So let's take a look at this shader, and it's pretty simple. It's going to look pretty crazy from the beginning. So let's just take a look at what I kind of got going on here, and it kind of looks complicated, but it's really not. It's mostly using this very basic three-way material blend that I just found on the Unreal Engine documentation, and it's just taking three textures and lerping them together using the vertex color parameter. Got some texture coordinates that you can play in there, and that's basically all you need. So taking this method and then expanding it out to where, okay, we're going to start to add our normal maps. We're going to start to add our roughness, displacement for masking, and then different UV coordination with some base parameters to control each thing. So once you start adding parameters and adding various textures that you can do, you can get really cool looking effects. And that's what we're going to build today in another scene. So let's talk a bit about the resources we're going to use. So I mentioned that I'm using Quixel, and that's because now it's free with Unreal Engine. Just log in with your Epic account, and you have access to this crazy library of materials, 3D models, and decals. And the first one I went ahead and just downloaded ahead of time. We're going to grab a few more. Is this fine asphalt material? Just to make sure I got it in there. Everything was working okay. So I'm going to be using everything pretty much from Quixel Bridge and bringing it over to UE4. That way we don't have to make our our own textures for this video. But one thing I did grab ahead of time outside of Quixel was this road with sidewalk material. If you have a Substance subscription, you should have access to all these materials inside Substance Source. So I grabbed this road with sidewalk, mostly because it was this tiling road material that had a sidewalk attached to it. So it's just like I kind of do 2-in-1, save a bit of time. So I went ahead and exported those textures out, and I made a quick scene inside of Maya. You can use your whatever 3D modeling software of choice, but it's pretty much going to be 3D modeling, Quixel, Substance if you want. You could totally just probably grab there's an American fine road material, I believe it's called, inside Quixel that's very similar to this material, just without the sidewalk. So I'm going to be using this scene to where I have this road material, and you can actually even see here now, this is just the albedo texture, but you can already see the problems with just using one material across a large surface. And this isn't even that big of a surface in relation to a world. Like in gameplay wise, this would be, you'd be over there in a second. So you can already see that this being a 4K texture, you're already starting to get really, really blurry. So like, how do we fix that? And how do we get our materials to look better with less repeating textures and just to make your scene feel a lot more natural? And that's what we're going to try to tackle with these new shaders. So for this road, I'm going to be using the same method that I was just talking about in my other scene, but for these grass areas over here, I am going to be using a totally different method. We're going to be getting inside Substance Painter and creating some mask and creating some splat maps, and we're going to bring that over to UE4, and we're going to talk about a different way you can set up a more complicated blend material. So one thing you'll notice is that I went ahead and, if I turn on my whole wireframe, is that I added a bunch of divisions. This is just to help with the vertex painting later on. We really, honestly, now looking back, don't need to go crazy with the plane materials because they're easy to add subdivisions through the actual shader. And since it's not using the vertex planing, it's kind of pointless. But I just went ahead and added subdivisions to everything. I kind of went crazy, just to make this kind of simple on ourselves. Not so simple on the computer, of course. You wouldn't want to go this crazy, but it's just for the tutorial sake, because like you wouldn't have all these edge loops here. But I want to get enough vertices inside the mesh before I even bring it into the engine, just so I can start getting a feel for the vertex painting. And one thing that you'll notice, if I go ahead and open up my UVs, you'll notice that I just have this tiling straight through the 0:1 ratio. So this texture is just repeating on the v-axis, and that's just what's kind of giving us that whole pattern, repeating using the texture, just simple stuff. So this is totally okay when bringing an engine. For these guys, I just kind of have them packed into the 0:1, just make sure they're all good and clean, because we're going to be using just a little different approach to that. So if you were wondering how I kind of set my UVs up for this, that's pretty much it. Very, very simple stuff. So you'll notice I have just like a green Lambert here. And if you'll notice inside the material, I actually just call this replace with grass. So what I'm going to do, even though I have a texture loaded inside Maya, I don't want to bring over any textures on the import process. I'm going to do that all on my own through Bridge for the additional textures. I already actually will bring these guys in separately because they're coming from Substance, so it gets imported a little differently. And yeah, I was just bringing this into Maya for testing to see if I get the UVs right and where to put the sidewalk in now. But I actually don't want to import any of that into the engine. So what my initial plan is material for the grass, maybe create another instance of that grass material for this side, just to make it look a little different, and then have a material for the main road, and then maybe another instance for the concrete sidewalk. And you can even do another instance for this side to just kind of make it look a little different. But I'm thinking we'll probably be using 3 total materials in general. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and just assign a new Lambert, and I'm going to call this replace with road, just so I know exactly what color lines up to what. And I just like to use some very bright, vibrant colors. Isolate this guy, and I'm going to come over to my angle tool, and I'm just going to use this to select this, and we'll just invert that selection, and then I'm going to make a new Lambert, and I'm going to call this place with concrete. So that's going to be our sidewalk material. Still going to be using the same texture, just a different instance with some different detail normal maps and just different materials blended on top of it. So I'm going to give that a little like magenta color. And I'll do my history, and I'm going to go ahead, grab this mesh, and I'm going to export this. I'll make an export folder. I'll just call this road mesh. And all these settings are fine. Make sure embed media is ticked. And let's go ahead and bring that into Engine. So I'm going to come over to my content. I'm going to go to geometry, and I'm going to add, we can find that, a road mesh. And I'm going to have generate light map UVs, and I'm going to have combined meshes turned on. And I like to change this import normals to import normals and tangents. And create new materials is fine. Let's go ahead and bring that guy in. Now you can see we got our mesh in here. And if I go to UVs, it's crazy, but it's because all the materials are on top of each other. You can see that we have a repeating texture going outside the 0 to 1 ratio, so came in fine, and we got our 3 materials. So if I wanted, I do have starter content on here. Start content, materials. You know, I could come in and be like, all right, well, you know, let's add a grass material to where it says grass, and you know that's hideous because it's not repeating at all. But you can now see we have links to our material. So this is like really simple to like change some stuff. So that's good. But let's get out of here, and we want to start actually making our material. So I already have a Megascans folder because I brought in that one material, this material over here, fine asphalt. And the reason I grabbed this one was just for testing, but I'm going to use this material for 2 different things. I'm going to use its normal map to add detail normal maps on top of the asphalt, and I'm also going to use this material to make the base of the wet material. I'm going to basically take this material and replace its roughness value with pretty much 0, and that'll be a different channel we get to paint on. But I'm going to go ahead and look for some other asphalt in here. I'm going to change this to, let's see here, let's change that to surfaces, asphalt, and let's look for a more rough kind of asphalt. Kind of want a more beat up, cracked one. Maybe if I change this to asphalt, let's look through torn. Yeah, I'm thinking some of these look a little better. Yeah, let's grab this destroyed one. So I'm gonna hit download, and while that's downloading, you'll see that it gives you all the textures. I don't know why they use this kind of weird naming convention of random letters, it seems, but it'll give you a material instance. This is what the material looks like with all the attributes, and it's got pretty complex shader already set up for you. They do a lot that's really, really handy just using the Megascan plugin. But we're going to be creating our own material. So really the only reason we want it is to get access to these maps. So I'm going to go ahead and let this download, and I'll grab a few other materials, and we'll get back and we'll start creating our shader. Okay, so I just exported everything through Bridge, and you can see that I now have the destroyed asphalt. I also went ahead and I grabbed this sort of large stone concrete tiles, as well as a rougher concrete. So we're going to play around with them. I also went ahead and made a materials folder, and I made a master materials folder and a textures folder, and inside the textures folder I just brought in that texture we were using inside of Maya. So that came in, everything's all good. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to go over to master materials, and we're going to create a new material, and we're going to call it M3-way blend. And we're gonna open up. So to get started, I'm going to be referring to this guide again. So I've got that on my other monitor. It's how I built the first material. And what we're going to want to do is we're going to just want to test. So we're going to just start messing around with just the base color for now, and we'll slowly start adding in our additional maps and make the material more complicated, exposing parameters, creating material instances, and so on. So actually, before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a new level. I'm just going to pick this default. I'm going to get rid of this cube, and I'm going to go over to my geometry, and I'm going to bring in my road mesh, make sure that's in old space, and that's it for now. So let's go back to our material. And what we're going to do is I'm going to come back to my textures, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring in my albedo for my road material, and I'm just going to plug that in. And immediately we'll go back to materials and save that guy. I'm going to right click, create a material instance, and call it MI road, and bring this up, and I'll just bring that into the materials, move there, just to make sure everything's all organized. Let's minimize this, and since it's the blue material, I'm just going to throw that onto the blue. So there we go, we got our road. Repeating just like we did inside Maya, so everything's all good. Let's return back to our master material, and yeah, let's start trying to get the vertex blending. So I'm going to hit Alt-click to get rid of that wire, and I'm going to go find, let me just make sure everything is going okay on the recording end. Go to Megascan, Surfaces, and yeah, I'm going to want to grab that 4K texture for the destroyed asphalt, and I'm going to want to go ahead and go to the fine asphalt, grab that material as well. So I could experiment just like seeing first of all like how each material looks on its own. So I'm just going to plug the fine asphalt into the base color, let that compile, and we'll see how that updates. Okay, let's do the same with the rough, just so I can have an idea later on when I'm playing around with tiling. Let's go ahead. Alright, so we're going to have to tile this one a lot more than the other two because it's a bit chunkier, but that might be okay. So, alright, let's kill that wire. I'm going to plug this one just in so I can see this in my viewport. Okay. Alright, so let's go ahead and grab these guys. Shift D to kind of organize them a bit better. Let's go to full screen. So, first thing you're going to want to grab is a vertex color. And that's going to be doing the heavy lifting here. And if you hold on L and click, you're going to create a lerp node. And we're going to need 3 of those. So I'm just going to hit Control W, Control W. That's going to duplicate it. And according to Unreal's documentation, this is the direction that it's supposed to go. So I'm going to take the blue channel for my vertex color, and I'm going to plug that into the alpha of the first lerp. And I'm going to take the green, and that's going to plug into the alpha of the second lerp. And the red is going to go into the alpha of the third. So RGB. And then we go ahead and we take our first material, our primary material, which is going to be this road material. Actually, you know what? Let's reorganize this a bit just to keep things a little bit more kosher. So I'm going to bring the more destroyed one down there. So this will be my order. So this will be the first material. So I'm going to go ahead and plug that one into my A. And I'm also going to plug that one into the B of the third lerp. And I'm going to plug this lerp into the third lerp, and the first lerp into the second. My second material is going to go into the B channel of the second lerp. And what are we missing? I believe the first one goes to A, and then this one goes to B. First one goes to B. Okay, cool. So let's test this out just to make sure everything's all good. So let's save that. Okay, all right, so that's sticking there. So let's go ahead and switch over to the painting tab, and I'm going to turn off these and just paint with red. I'm going to hold Shift. Okay, yeah, so you can already see me erasing. I can start to paint. And if I go ahead and let's see. Oh, let's change that. Must be that one. Okay, so it's the green channel. So if I hit Shift and click, I can bring in that more nasty looking one. So cool. Let's switch back over to red and let's just get it that way for now. All right, so awesome. So we already know right from the start that our vertex paint is working. So now we just got to expand this out into other materials. So I'm going to, I'll bring these guys here, just let it be a little straight. And I'm going to highlight everything, and I'm going to hit Control W. That's going to create a duplicate of everything. And we're going to bring it over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of minimize this, get this kind of pushed into the corner, and I'm going to make it to where I can click on each texture sample. And here's our texture. So I'm now going to use this exact same wire setup, but with my normal maps. So this is the destroyed asphalt. So let's go ahead and grab that and throw the normal map in there. Let's go ahead for the, this is the fine asphalt. So let's grab that one, throw that into the texture on there. And then for my road, back to materials, textures, and we're going to throw our road normal map. So we can just plug this into the shader and see what happens. But we're eventually going to want a little bit more control, especially with how each normal map is probably calculated very differently, and we want to be able to give the artist control over how intense the normals are. So let's go ahead and save and test this out, so you can see that we now have normal maps working. So it's a little hard to see, but there is a bump, so it especially should be noticeable when we go ahead and paint that finer asphalt in. Yeah, let me make my brush a bit bigger. Yeah, so let's Yeah, so you should definitely, yeah, so it's definitely got the normal map. You can definitely see it there in the light. So it's good news. That's all working as well. So we can continue to, that kind of looks cool. We can continue to go back to the shader, bring that over here, and I'm gonna go back to my other project, and you'll notice that inside the normals, I have this spread out quite a bit. And what I did here is that I gave each material its own lerp prior to the 3 vertex blending lerps, because I lerped in a basic, just a blue color, which is just a flat normal. And I have that lerping with the actual normal map, and we have a parameter going into the alpha. So that way we can change the intensity of each normal map individually. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm gonna bring that over there. Let's go ahead back to the other Unreal Engine view, and so I'm gonna go ahead and unhook these wires, and let's kind of bring this bring this over here, and all these guys, I'm gonna stretch them out, kind of line them up more over this way, and what I'm going to do is unhook each one of these. So still have our alphas, still have the lerps going into each other, but I want to spread these out a bit more. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a constant 3 vector, and I'm going to just go ahead to the blue channel and just hit 1, and that's going to give us just the same color for a flat normal. So I'm going to go ahead and let's push this one down. I'm going to hit Control W, bring that down there, and Control W one more time. So we have one for each map. And you could probably use just one of these, but if you want to go ahead and expose these to maybe another normal map that you want lerping inside of each, you can do that. But for right now, I'm just going to make 3 just because it's simpler to lay out. So I'm going to hit L, create my lerp, and what I'm going to do is just plug the normal map straight into A, plug the flat normal right into B, and then for alpha, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to type constant, and so I'm going to create my first parameter. So I'm going to go ahead and this is the destroyed asphalt, so I'm going to convert this to parameter, and I'm going to call it destroyed norm intensity, just to be short. So yeah, so destroyed normal intensity. So go ahead and make another one of those. Come down to here, plug that straight into there, that straight into there, and this is going to be fine asphalt intensity. And then one more time, we're going to go ahead and bring that over there. So RGB into B, and this is just the road. So road, normal intensity. And now we are going to, let me just close this off. Back to my material. Where's my head at? Okay, so now we're going to treat these 3 lerps. Let me just actually, if you select multiple nodes and you want them to line up, you can just like highlight all 3 and hit Shift D, and it'll kind of snap into place. And bring this kind of backwards. So I'm just going to plug this in the exact same way I would plug just the texture maps, but now with the individual lerps. So I'm going to go ahead. So the first one goes into the B, and the third one, it goes into A, and then the second one goes into the B channel of the second one, and let's see what goes in the last one, and the third one goes into the B channel of the last one. Alright, so now we should have our our normal maps all set up again, but now we have a bit more functionality. So I'm actually going to control this, and then I'm going to just make those all snap together so it's a little bit neater. And then I can go over here and just plug it into my normal. Hit save. And now, if I go over to where I find my material instance, you'll notice that I now have parameters for each normal intensity. So you can see the road here. So if I go ahead and then road and just start really cranking or bringing that down, it's going to get more and more intense or way less intense, depending on your preference. And I just realized I should probably go back in and change each of these parameters for its default value to just be like 0.5. So it's at a very neutral value. So that way, most of the time, when you create a material instance, your normal is already set to a pretty reasonable value. Let's go ahead and compile that. And you'll notice that if I go ahead and hit these, it'll default to 0.5. So yeah, that's cool. So let's start going ahead and adding some of our other types of maps. So let's go ahead and create our roughness. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go over to the albedo base color, and I'm going to duplicate that just because I have more craziness kind of going over here. So I'll just Control W. Let's bring this. So for the most part, it's really just replacing the materials with the roughness maps. However, for the fine asphalt, I'm going to go ahead and change this to, I'm going to make it constant. I'm just going to let this be 0. So I'm going to plug the 0 in place of that, and I'm just going to delete that there. And I guess I could convert it to a parameter. I'm just going to call it wetness, and right now it's just at 0 for 0 roughness basically, because I want that to be the puddles. So yeah, let's go back to our. Actually, I'm just going to do the road one since I'm right here, and just go ahead and throw in my road roughness material, and back to mega scans, destroyed, and then go ahead and grab the roughness for that, and bam, we have our roughness. So I'm going to come into here, I'm just going to bring this down, roughness, and let's go ahead and save and compile. And inside the material instance, I now have wetness. I'm going to leave that at default. So let's go ahead and let's try painting a bit again. So now you can see it's like super shiny where that asphalt is. So pretty cool. And we're going to, like I said earlier, we're going to be using that same normal map to kind of tile across the whole thing. So it should look a bit better when that's working, but it's pretty cool that you can kind of see that the roughness value is already changing. You can see the destroyed is much rougher than the base asphalt, and then of course this one's super reflective. So let's keep pushing forward. Let's go ahead and let's try adding displacement now. So go back. I'll just leave this. Paint it back, for testing. Actually, you know what? Before we do that, I think what would be cooler is adding the detail normal map. Now, so one thing we can do is let's add a bit more functionality to our normals. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a overall normal intensity. So first thing I wanted to do is go ahead and create a mask. I believe it's bit mask. Nope. Let's see, what is it called? Mask. One second. So we're going to want to create a mask, and we're looking for component mask. And what I want to do is I want to make sure I just have R and G on, and I'm going to go ahead and pump that into the mask, isolate that, and then I'm going to feed that into a multiply. If I hold down M and click, I'll bring up a multiply, plug that into there, and we're going to plug into a constant, and its default is just going to be 1, and I'll convert that to a parameter. I'm going to call it normal intensity. And what I need to do is now append back the green channel. So I'm going to make an append. Just an append vector. Plug the multiply into A, and then I'm going to create a constant, and we're going to just set this to 1. And instead of that, lerp, we're going to plug this append into our normal. We're going to go ahead and hit apply. And bring up our material intensity. And so now we have each normal map's intensity separate. We also now have this overall intensity, which I could, go crazy with. So it's going to lag a bit there because I'm changing values very fast. But set that to 5. Again, kind of what we were doing earlier. So really, really cool. But now it does it on a more universal scale. So nice functionality. Save. Close out of that. But now let's go ahead and create a detail normal map, which, if you don't know what a detail normal map is, it's just a secondary normal map that will tile across the whole material separate, and it'll I'm pretty sure, depending on how the node works inside Unreal, it will add or decrease depending on how far the camera is. So if I'm really high up here, it won't use the normal map, but when I start getting close, it'll start enabling it and blending it on top of the material. So I can add a secondary asphalt material on top of this, and it'll just give it some finer granular detail bump to just make the surface look a bit more realistic. So like I said earlier, I'm going to go ahead and go back to Mega Scans, and I'm going to steal the normal map from the fine asphalt, and I'm going to bring that in. And right now I could actually convert this to a parameter and just call it detail normal map. So when you create a material instance, you can swap this out with just a different normal map that you want. And what we're looking for is a blend angle corrected normals. And what you do is you plug your default normal map in there, and you plug in your additional normal. And let's go ahead and give that a try. So go ahead and grab the wire, bring it up, normal, let that compile. You can already see that there's some extra granular effect. So right now it's just repeating at the same rate the other material is. So I'm going to go ahead and we can add this later to the other materials as well, but I'm going to go ahead and create a texture coordinate. I'm going to go ahead and bring that into a multiply, and go ahead and create a constant and convert that to a parameter. This is going to be called detail normal UVs. This is how we're going to tile across the surface differently. Default value is just going to set that to 1, and we're going to plug that into our UVs. So go ahead and hit save. We can do a few more crazier things. So just go over here, bring up our road, click that, and you can see we now have our detail normal UVs. So let's bring that up to 4. Yeah, and you can already see that starting to kind of take place, and it makes it look a bit more natural. So since this is the same normal map as the other material that we're blending on top, I probably want to bind this UV multiply the same as that one, so it makes sense. But I still want to give the artist functionality of controlling the UVs of the detail normal map separately, just because I want to give the maximum control in case they do want to overlay a totally different material. So that's really cool, and we can also go back in. I'm going to turn this actually down to maybe 2. Yep. And I'm going to actually go ahead and add the same functionality we did to the overall normal map to kind of create some intensity, but also do it separately for just the detailed normal map. So I'm going to do the exact same thing that I was doing earlier. So create a mask, component mask. Go ahead and plug in the let me just plug that in there so there's no error. And then go ahead and create a multiply, plug in the component mask, go ahead and create a constant, convert this to a parameter, detail norm intensity, set that to the default value of 1. We want to append node again, append vector, bring that in, and then of course constant, change that value to 1. Alright, so now we have some intensity parameters, but for the detail normal map. So let's go ahead and plug that into the additional normal and save. And now if we go ahead and turn on detail normal intensity, we could really crank that up. So obviously that's too much, but maybe we change that to 2, maybe change that to like 4 or something. You can start to see it looks cool. Like, we're getting some extra detail in there, and it looks better than just, material on its own, tiling across, repeating. So, yeah, nice. So, save that, and we're going to see if we can add some other types of functionality here. You could do this, of course, the same method with adding in ambient occlusion. That, of course, works. I think the only thing else I'm going to try getting to work is maybe this height. But I don't really feel like it's too worth it on a material like this, though maybe that destroyed asphalt could benefit from that. So yeah, let's just go ahead and add that anyway. But there's some other things we can do inside the material to keep adding some of this additional customization. So one thing that I forgot to mention that's really important, especially when visualizing materials, is that Unreal has this auto exposure feature, especially anytime you create a new map and there's no post-processing volume. So I just went into the visual effects tab and added a post-processing volume. I went all the way down to the bottom and made sure I hit infinite unbound. That means depending on where the box is, it doesn't matter. It's completely global to the scene. But most importantly, if you crawl all the way up to the exposure settings, taking this and turning on min brightness and max brightness and just setting them both to 1, and that'll kind of get rid of that like weird like auto exposure, like if you ever like have that effect where you're like in a dark room and you open the door and the sun comes in and you're like blinded for a minute. Like Unreal put that into the engine and that's on by default, which sounds cool, but it makes visualizing things really, really complicated. So yeah, whenever you create a new scene, just add a post-processing volume and just turn that auto exposure stuff off. It really, really helps. So yeah, our material is starting to look pretty good. If we go back to the graph, maximize this. I'm going to go ahead and again highlight my base color nodes. Control W, duplicate those, and we're gonna do our displacement. So I'm gonna come down here, bring it down here, and we'll go back and organize our graph a bit. But come over to our textures and go ahead and I'm gonna throw the height map. And I'm going to come back, we're going to go to the mega scans, materials, this will be the fine asphalt, throw the displacement into there, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to go back to the destroyed asphalt, and we're going to throw its displacement map in there as well. Hit save. And before I plug anything in, I'm going to come back to the root node. Click the root node, and I'm going to scroll down to where it says tessellation. By default, it's no tessellation. I'm going to change that to flat tessellation. So now we'll have this world displacement and this tessellation multiplier opened up. So let's go ahead and let's grab from our lerp results. Sorry for that. Plug that into world displacement. And if you notice, if we zoom in on our shader ball here, we can change this from lit to wireframe mode. And you'll notice that it's pretty tessellated. We enable tessellation, but let me turn that off. And you'll notice that without that world displacement, actually let's turn it back on. It's not as subdivided until it recompiles, because we have that world displacement back on. So you can actually control how many vertices are actually being added through just the shader. So we can add subdivisions, straight inside the shader itself. So if we actually went back to Maya and reduced the poly count, we didn't need to add that many subdivisions, as crazy as we did. In the modeling software, again, you would never use that many in the first place. But when you're using this vertex blend technique, the more vertices means the more you get to paint on a mesh. And it's important for optimization sakes to handle that through the shader. So more tessellation obviously means a more complicated shader, which means performance costs and that sort of thing. But you can then control it in engine without creating several different meshes, which is really cool. So we could actually go back into Maya and reduce the poly count and still get the effect that we want through just the shader using this world displacement, this tessellation modifier. But one of the main reasons I added the vertices like I did inside Maya is so we could see the effect of the vertex painting from the start. Because if we didn't and we ignored this tessellation multiplier and stuff, if it was just 4 vertices, the vertex painting wouldn't work because there's just not enough vertices. So obviously we don't want to get this crazy. So let's try controlling that. So I'm going to come to this tessellation multiplier. I'm going to pull wire out. I'm going to pull constant. And if you notice 0, it's back to normal. Just totally, just the straight up sphere. So if I change this to 0.5 and that recompiles, you'll notice that it starts adding more and more. I'm going to boost that up to 1, which is default, I believe, without throwing a node in there. That's the result you'll get. So I want to be able to control this, so I'm going to convert this to a parameter, and I'm going to call it tessellation multiplier. I can type, and I'm going to set that to a default value of 0.5. And actually one cool thing that you can do is run this into a clamp and plug that into your tessellation multiplier, and you can have the default value be 0 and 1. So that way, if you give this material instance to someone and you know for a fact that in your budgets for the game you can't go over a certain tessellation factor, nobody can crank it over the limit that you set, unless of course they came into the master material and ripped this node out. So that's handy. So I'll leave that be, and we're going to save. And when we go back to our viewport after this compiles, you'll notice if I turn on wireframe, it's just way more dense. Comparing it to the plane, and of course the skybox is in the way, but yeah, this is a lot more dense, and you'll notice that it gets denser the closer we get up to, which is why you want to do this in the shader in the first place, because if someone's way far out in the game and they're not near it, it's not going to be as heavy. It's almost like an LOD system inside the shader, which is really cool. So it'll get more detailed when you get closer, but when it's far away, it'll subtract the unnecessary vertices. So that also allows us to paint, more more detail. So now we're not getting that like splotchy effect so much. So you could even use like more different types of brushes and get different effects there. So it's kind of handy. Still getting a little bit of a splotchy effect, but if I play with the painting parameters, that should improve. But it's much easier to get down and start painting rather than having to be zoomed out with a gigantic brush. I can still like kind of chip away with this smaller brush, but earlier I had to be like pretty much here and just to get rid of it. So kind of cool. Yeah, so you can also kind of see the height map at work too. But if I was to take anything out, it would probably be that displacement mapping, just because on mesh like this, it's their roads are pretty flat, and we'll be having decals on top of it anyway. But for like rolling hills and like gravel and other things, you might want to use it in cases like that. So back to green, just start painting my rougher material, and that's starting to look kind of cool. So yeah, so now we're getting a lot of breakup, and this material is looking a lot more diverse than we go back to the Maya scene where I'm just going to throw the road material on here. Yeah, there we go. Definitely a lot more detailed. Yeah, so let's go back to our graph, and we'll start to clean up our material and add a bit more functionality, and then we'll move on to the next one. So another thing we're going to want to add, besides cleaning up and starting to group some of these nodes together, is that we're going to want to create some UV parameters. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of just check some of the areas and kind of group things together more, and just make sure that they're kind of evenly spaced, because now we're going to have a lot more wires running across these different node groups. Actually, before I forget, a little bit off topic, I'm just going to go ahead into this metallic component and create a constant, and we're just gonna zero that out, because we're not using any metallic materials. So yeah, so let's go ahead and let's add some UV parameters. So kind of like what we did with the detail normal map, I'm just going to kind of let that sit there, be its own thing. But I'm going to come over here to this empty space, and I'm going to go ahead and create my texture coordinate, and I'm going to hit multiply, and we have 3 materials, so I'm going to duplicate that twice. Since we have this road material that's tiling because of the UV factor, we really only need 2, because we don't really need to touch that. But if this was like a different type of structure and you just wanted to make a generic 3-way blend, you would probably want to have 3, just because 1 for each. So we're gonna make it anyway, but I'll just leave this one set to 1 always, just to make it a little bit easier. Okay, so first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna leave this UV tiling 1 on 1 for each axis, and I'm just gonna plug this into each A channel of the multiply, and we're going to kind of spread these out, and we're going to go ahead and make a constant, convert that, whoops, not previewing, convert that to a parameter, and we're going to call this road UV's multi, and W, plug that into B, and we're going to call this, I believe the second one is the fine, so we're going to call that fine asphalt UV multi. And lastly, destroyed UV's multi. So we have the ability to change the UVs inside the material instance. So let's go ahead and let's bring this over. Let's see here. let's bring this over here. And the first thing I can do pretty easily is that I'll just go ahead and grab this road, and I'm going to go over all the way to the UVs for the road. And since that's on the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and move these down just so the wires are kind of in the appropriate spot. So I'll go ahead and plug this into all of them. So do the normal map right there. Displacement. And I'm going to do the roughness. And we can add some reroute nodes just to kind of clean this up. I'll get to that later. Right now, I'm just trying to be quick. So I got the main road, so let me just make sure the fine asphalt is the second one, which it looks like it is. Yep, so I'm going to go over to the fine asphalt. So let's bring the destroyed one up. Bring this one down so the order is correct. We go to fine asphalt and plug that into the UVs. We don't need to do it for roughness since we're just using a parameter. So go ahead and do that to the normal map. And again, since I'm using the same normal map for the detail normal blended on top, I could also just like plug that into there, since you know it probably makes sense that they're tiling the same amount. But since I want this material to be expansive, I'm just going to give it its own individual parameter, and just if I want to tile it by 4, I'll just make sure I set it to 4 in both UV parameters. And let's go ahead and go down to displacement. Yes. Okay, cool. So lastly, we just need to do it to the destroyed asphalt, UVs, and right there. And still gotta do displacement. Displacement. Cool. Alright, so now we got texture coordinates. Just put that there. And then, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go ahead and bring this out. Make it kind of down there. I'll bring all these guys up a bit. And shit. Don't really want to do that. Yeah, that's fine. I just kind of wanted that to be the same as that, but it's fine. So, yeah, let's go ahead and save that. And I'm going to drag a marquee over this guy, hit C, and I'm going to bring this to comment and just call it UVs. Perfect. And I'm going to bring this append closer to this append right here. And what we're going to do is we're going to highlight this. Make Roughness. And then we're going to comment on this, and we're going to call it normal intensity. Down here, I'm going to bring this down, comment, displacement. Albedo. Well, not albedo. And finally, roughness. So sweet, we got our blend material. So let's go ahead and save that. And actually, before I go ahead and test some things out, there is a few cool things we could do to go ahead and group these. So everything that's related to the destroyed material, I'm going to go ahead and click, and we're going to go over to the destroy. We're going to control click that, destroyed normals, and then I think that's it. So we're going to go ahead and down to group, we're just going to call it destroyed material. So that way when in our material instance, it'll group those together so we can see them at the same time. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for the fine asphalt. Click that there. And the wetness I'll also grab. And we're going to call this fine asphalt. You could take this a step ahead and expose each texture map and group them together. So if you want to plug in different materials all together, which would make sense since this is just supposed to be a generic three-way blend, you could do that, and that would take your textures a lot further, and you can have a lot more material instances with a lot more customization. But for right now, I'm just going to leave it as is, since I'm mostly building this for the road. But we'll utilize some of it for the sidewalk. So I'll do this for the road as well. And road. And we'll group this to road. And then lastly, I'll go ahead and group everything for the detail normals as well. So detail normal intensity and the detail normal map. Actually, let's not do that. I don't think I can group them. Texture. Detail normal. Cool. So save that. Alright. So let's go ahead and move over to our other material. Oh, and I must have did something wrong. So, oh, I know what it is. I should go ahead and set all these defaults to 1. That would definitely help. Perfect. Now let's check out our material instance. So I'm going to let's paint some Alright, let's paint some wetness. Which is kind of cool. So I want to crank the tiling up on this destroyed. So let's go over to the detailed normal UVs. Oh, sorry, the destroyed UVs, and change that to maybe 2. You can see that we're able to control the tiling there. Pretty sweet. And kind of paint some back stuff. So let's clear this, and I'm gonna turn my brush strength pretty low. Increase the fall off or something. Yeah, there we go. Let's go ahead and just create some like puddles or something. And remove that or something. Yeah, so this is starting to get pretty cool. So we go ahead paint and the fine asphalt, we can come in and fine asphalt, we could even like decrease it if we wanted it like chunkier, but let's set this to 2 as well. Yeah, it starts to get really fine and kind of cool. So since my detail asphalt is set to 4, I'll set this one to 4, like I was saying earlier. And yeah, we're starting to get some kind of cool results here. Again, this is just one material on the road, so it's pretty impressive you can do with just, you know, one material, rather than, you know, if you decide to use multiple textures rather than just one texture tiling throughout. So definitely pretty cool. So I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to create a variation using some of these large stone rough concrete for the sidewalks, and I'll be back when we have that. So I went back into the main material master material graph, and what I went ahead and did is that I exposed the destroyed asphalt materials, and I just give them albedo, displacement, normal, roughness, and I went ahead and swapped it with one of the concrete materials that I downloaded earlier from Megascans, this large stone. And I also replaced the detail normal map with this rough concrete normal map. So, and we still have that road material tiling across it because it had a sidewalk material kind of on there. So it's starting to look pretty cool. So I got the main material kind of tiling over here, and I can go back in and adjust the detail normal map intensity, the size of it, if I want to make it a little smaller and stuff like that. But then I got painted over here, just this rough kind of concrete kind of fading out into the, more worn, maybe washed out surface, which is cool. So, I can take that and easily expand it, and, make a totally different material on it, which is really cool. So that pretty much covers the whole 3-way vertex blending material setup. Now I'm going to move over to a different scene where I have the splat map version up, and we'll take a look at that, and we'll talk about how we can use that method for the grass. So let's check that out now. So here I am in another scene that I used for a different project, and I've created these 4 mountains using this method of blend materials, and we can see that we can get close up, and they're not the most super detailed mountains ever. Of course, these are for things like way in the background, but you can see I have like various textures kind of scattering, and if you were to like paint something like this inside Unreal with the landscape tool, especially like there's no pen pressure, you got to use a mouse, like when you're a 3D artist and you come across like the Unreal landscaping or the vertex painting, you kind of get frustrated when you're used to things like ZBrush or just painting in Photoshop, because it's just so much more natural, so much more artistic, and easy to be creative. So the whole idea behind creating a material like this was like, oh, how can I bring that artistic flexibility and use certain tools that do things really, really well, but then port it over to a material. So I have this master material, and what it is that it takes these individual material functions, and then it blends them together with this matte layer blend material. You can get up to 10 materials that you want, and it uses this mask map to basically blend the several materials together, so that way you can get something great. And it's called mask map, sometimes referred to as splat map, and it looks crazy. It's this crazy colorful thing. Like, how could I ever get an interesting texture out of this clown world looking material? But basically this is just what it looks like when it's collapsed together. Basically, what it is that it's three individual materials, or three individual opacity masks, just kind of sitting on top of each other. So when it's all collapsed together, this is what it kind of looks like. And how I was able to make this is that I brought this mountain mesh that I made, and I brought it into Substance Painter, and I just threw some materials on there, and like here it's really ugly because this is just one single material and 1:1 ratio, texturing like it's a normal prop, so it's gonna be pretty blurry. But I didn't use it to just get the textures extracted from here. I did it because Substance is really good at creating generators and smart masks really fast. So I wanted to see if I can get like variation really quick. So I didn't export all these maps that you would normally do for a normal prop, but I went into these groups and I right clicked on the mask and I exported the mask to a file. And then I went inside Photoshop and I collapsed them together inside one big texture map. And inside Unreal Engine, I'm sampling each color channel to then blend throughout the shader. So this is really powerful because if you actually put some effort into sculpting some mountains or painting some things inside Substance Painter, or if you're basing your generators and your parameters based off a high poly like mountain that you made or something like that, this can get really powerful because you're actually using all that information that you did by hand inside your sculpting program or your texturing program, and you're able to retain that information throughout here. So I basically have a couple of parameters exposed, including that mask map and the overall normal map. So if you did bake like a high poly or something, you could use that on the overall mountain as well, which is really cool, and it kind of helps maintain its shape when it's far away. But I also set it up to where you could have each material individually have its own UV tiling, and it's really cool way to work. So I'm going to go ahead and talk through how to set that up, and we're going to use that same method for the grass. So one thing that you'll notice is different is that this doesn't plug into a normal root node like we were using originally, and that's because I went down to this use material attributes to where you have to plug these material functions, which is basically just standard materials on their own, inside of another master material that are able to get blended with other things. So it's a way of like simplifying your material graph. You don't have to just put normal standard materials in here. You can just do things that you do all the time. So kind of like what we did with the normal intensity or the texture UV offset. You can store that in a material function, just bring it into your graph, just have it ready to go, so you don't have to make those nodes all the time. But in this instance, I'm basically treating them like normal materials. So I have a folder called Material Functions, and inside each one, I have just looks like a normal material. And the reason this preview is getting kind of weird is because I actually found a triplanar shader setup online, and I'm plugging that into the UV, so that way I can get less distortion in my UV projection. But that's something I'm not going to go into because it goes beyond my knowledge of how all this works. I just know what a triplanar shader does and why you'd want to use one, which is why we're getting this kind of offset effect. But basically, it just looks like a standard material. So we're going to set a few of those up in the other project, and we're going to go ahead and create a quick splat map for our grass, and we're going to get a couple materials on there. So this should be really cool. So let's head on over to the other project. I went back into Megascan's bridge, and I went and found about 4 grass materials and brought them into Unreal. So this lawn grass is what I'm going to be used as my main one, but I've also got in this dried grass, and I also have in this damp soil one as well, and I think I also have I could probably grab another one, which I might do in a bit. But let's head back into our materials folder, and we're gonna go ahead and let's actually create a another folder inside the master material. And we're gonna call it material functions. And if I go inside the folder and right click, I'm not going to go up and grab a normal material. I'm actually going to come down to this materials and textures, and we're going to create a material function. So I'm going to call this MF base material. Or actually, yeah, let's just call this lawn, because that's the main one I'm going to use. Normally you could make a base material folder, material function that just like has your standard PBR set up, but I'm going to make one for each just for the sake of this. But you know, like I said, this is very powerful, and you can get away with doing all that stuff. So first thing you'll notice is this output result. That's being previewed. So I'm just gonna go ahead and grab a wire out of here, and we're gonna look for this node called make material attributes, and that's basically like our root node that we're kind of used to. So with that set up, I'm gonna move this over, and I'm gonna come over to the Megascan library, and I'm gonna find that lawn material, and I'm going to just bring in my albedo. I could just bring in all of them, and I'll just stack them. There we go. So let's make that full size. Grab the normal map. Bring these guys down. There's AO. There's displacement. Roughness. Okay, let's get this kind of in order. Displacement. There we go. So now it's just as simple as plugging these nodes in. However, if you wanted to convert these into a parameter, you can't just convert into a parameter normally, because they won't get exposed the same way as working in a normal parameter. So a normal material, sorry. So what you have to do is actually come in, pull your RGB value out, and type function, and there's this function input. And here you can call, okay, this is my albedo, and I want to be able to expose the ability to plug in my own custom albedo. So I can call this albedo, and then I can go ahead and plug that in. So you'd have to actually do that for each one. So Control W, and you just do that for each individual map. So normal, plug into normal, and you know, so on and so forth. This is roughness. Is that displacement? And lastly, ambient occlusion. And then go back in and name each thing. And everything that I should say, and I can talk about this when we're in the main node graph, anything that you do expose inside the material function, you need to make sure that you're able to plug something into the node and use it. And what that means is that if you, Unreal has it set up to where if you expose something in a material function and then you don't plug a parameter into that, it's not going to compile the same way like you can use or not use a material parameter in the main node. So it is something you want to watch out for. You know, so make sure you definitely use it, or at least put something in there that's filler to then you know, put something in so the material is able to compile. But that's something I can I'll you know, reach on in a bit. And then lastly, I'm going to go ahead and create my texture coordinate, and I'm going to plug that into a multiply like we were doing earlier. And I can plug this into a constant, but again, I can't convert this to a parameter because it doesn't use them the same way as a normal one will. So I'm just going to leave this as a value of 1. I'm just going to leave it as a normal constant, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to type function input, but I'm going to leave this be an input scalar, because right here we're using a vector of 3, but for this we just want to use a scalar. So that way, when I plug this in and use this in the main material graph, I can still expose my UV parameters for this material. So just going to put these all into the UVs. And that is it. We are set up and ready to go. That's a basic material function that's just standard grass material. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And what I'm going to do is go back to materials. I'm just going to call this, you know what, never mind, because I can't use it the same way. So I'm just going to rename this to MF, and I'm just going to call it base material. And if I go ahead and create a new material, call it M, and just call it grass splat map, or just grass splat for now. I can open that up, and if I go to material functions, I can pull my base material in here, and you'll notice that I have a result, and I have spots for each node that I exposed, except for this in. I have to kind of go in here and call this scalar, change that from in to these. Save. And the cool thing about this is that these are all exposed, so I could duplicate this material several times and bring the albedo maps, bring the texture maps into here, and just use this function over and over again. But I'm gonna kind of make it a little bit easier on myself, kind of cutting back on customization, but making it easier for the sake of the video. So I'm gonna go ahead and close out of this. I'm going to delete this, and I'm just going to rename this to lawn. I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to remove these functions. Yep. And just plug them in normally. And just because, again, I don't want to expose these parameters, but I could if I needed to, or if this was a real game or something like that. But I will leave this because I do want to have access to my UVs. So that's fine. We'll save that. And I'm going to make a duplicate of this, call it MF. It was called like damp soil. So open that one, and I'll just come over to my texture files, go to Megascans, damp soil, and we're just going to replace the texture maps. Okay. Perfect. So save that one. And lastly, we'll do... Oh, I downloaded that one twice. So let me go grab 2 more materials, and we'll continue setting up this the shader. Okay, so I went back to Megascans, and I found this uncut grass and this wild grass. So we're gonna use those. So let's go back to our master material. We're gonna bring up our grass splat material, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to our material functions, and we're just gonna bring all 4 in. Okay, and I'll just move those to the side. I'm going to go ahead and go come down to use material attributes, so it collapses into that, and I'm going to type, let's see, match layer or 10 layer So I'm going to come over to the collapsed material and I'm going to drag out a wire and I'm going to type mat or mat layer blends 10 layer blend. Here we go. I'm going to plug that blended material into make material attribute. For some reason I couldn't pull out the wire that way and get the node to pop up, so I had to like, it's kind of weird. Alright, so I'm going to reorganize this. I'm going to use my my lawn as my main material, so I'm going to plug this into the background. And you'll notice we'll get an error. That's because we have nothing plugged into the UV offset. So that's something we'll take care of. But that's what I was talking about earlier when I was referring to the fact that you have to, if you expose anything, you have to have something plugged into it. So yeah, so and also here you'll notice there's this baked normals tab. So if you did have something coming from a high poly, so like if you were making a mountain or something, you could then plug your baked high resolution normal map in there. So to plug the rest of these nodes in, I'll just I'll put the soil in. Well, yeah, I guess that makes sense. I'll put the soil in as the first layer, layer 1. We're getting an error because I don't have anything plugged into that, and then I'll just put wild grasses as layer 2 and uncorrect grass as layer 3. So let's go ahead and go to Photoshop, and I'm going to hit create new, and we're going to make a new 1024 by 1024 map, and I'm just going to completely fill it with black. And this is going to look really terrible because I'm just making it for demonstration's sake, but I'm going to go to my red channel, I'll switch to my white brush, and I'm just going to put some white there. And I'm going to do the same thing to my green channel, just put some there, and do it to the blue as well. So if we view RGB all together, basically whatever's in the green material blend, using that as a mask, that material will pop there, so on and so forth. So really cool. So we're just gonna save this off. I'm just gonna go to my research project, textures, I'm just gonna call it splat map, and I'm just gonna save it as a PNG. Okay, cool. So we'll return to Unreal Engine. Let's save. That's fine. Come to materials, textures, import textures, splat map, and we're gonna want to open this up. Since this is not an actual like normal albedo texture, normal map. Well, you wouldn't use it for a normal animated. Basically, not an albedo or emissive material. We're going to want to make sure we go ahead and untick use sRGB. And I'm also going to come down to where it says from texture group. I'm going to change this to no bitmaps because it's splatting. It's not something that's trying to be tiled like the same. It's like it's a full on just normal texture. Like we're using it as a mask. So I don't want it to bitmap. So we'll save that and close out of that. And now I can bring that guy here. And if I was trying to make a specific material, I would pay attention to which channel I want to want. But since these are pretty much just dots, I'm just going to drag them off kind of randomly. So I'll plug the R channel into layer 1. I'll plug green into layer 2. And I'll plug blue into layer 3. And we're still getting the error because we don't have any UV parameters. So I'm going to make a constant, make it into a parameter, uncut grass UVs. Now there's no more error. So Control W, just going to plug them into all these. And perfect. We're going to set the default value to 1, and we're going to call this lawn. Okay. And this will be soil. This will be wild grass. And now this should be okay. And we have our let's check and make sure this works. Getting errors, I'm not sure why. Okay, sorry about that. I was getting an error in my shader graph, and the reason was because I was adding too many textures. So I solved that by just going into each material function and just got rid of the ambient occlusion and the height map since they're not too important. So this is a simple fix. I'm not sure if there is a better way of getting around that. That's something I'd love to know now, because what if I did want to make something really complicated with like some height map limiting, but for now this should be fine. So we got our material to compile. So let's go ahead and let's try it out. So I'm gonna save, and I'm gonna go ahead to my grass splat, and I'm gonna create a material instance. mi grass million, I don't know, and yeah, I'm gonna throw that on my yeah. So you can already see that we have the main grass in each patch with the different materials. So the splat map is indeed working. One thing that would be cool, actually, let me go back to the main splat and let's convert this splat map to parameter. So now inside the material instance you can bring in your own splat map. So if you wanted to make something a little different, you could do that. So if I went into Photoshop and went to my green channel and just, I don't know, did one of these in the blue, and did one of these, and red, whatever, and then save that as like a V2. I could bring that into Unreal and just make sure everything's all good. Yep. And I could make a separate grass 2. Go to my textures, import to Unreal, bring in that new wacky splat map. Make sure to turn off sRGB and do no bitmaps. Save. Come over to master material. I should bring these and put them into materials. Move there. Keep it out of the master materials. And go to grass 2. Turn on splat map. Come to textures. Grab the second one. Bam. Use that and plug that into my. Yeah. So now you get the extra effect that we just did. So this is really powerful, and of course I have normal parameters exposed, so if I want to go ahead and tile the soil a bit more, I can. If I want to tile the main lawn, you can. And kind of cool. And just 4. Yeah. So that's really cool. So really powerful, and yeah, I don't know, just fun way to make some more interesting materials. All right. So for the last part, let's have some fun here. So I went ahead back into Bridge, and I went ahead and started looking at the decal section, and I went to Asphalt, and I downloaded a few decals. So to really also like help sell that material, you could start bringing in some of these. Really definitely breaks up the effect as well. So like, depending on how far you push that or bring that out, it's really cool. So this one's huge, but I can scale and bring it up and down, and if it wanted to look like I patched this up before, or it's more recent, still got that tread kind of popping out, and I can go back to my texture painting. Kind of, let's see here. Let's grab that decal and push that in. Get a bit. Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah, it's starting to look pretty cool. And you could do this with grass as well, or anything really, and yeah, just to kind of help sell that you know, realism. So put a little stop. Definitely looks more believable now. Let me get a little bit faded. So that's pretty much it. 2 ways to do blended materials inside Unreal. Get some breakup, make it not look so repetitive, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So I hope you learned something. I definitely learned something by experimenting and looking in. And again, thanks to these three channels I mentioned earlier, underscore Ben Cloward and Ryan Manning, like really helped me out. And yeah, so hopefully, yeah, again, I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks, and take care.